Yeah.
Hey, Chief, any further information on that investigation for that Thunder Bay Theater fire? Curious.
The, sell that job. what's in public safety meeting? And to pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
States
States
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So we have the agenda. Hopefully everyone has read the agenda, reviewed it. Are there any additions, subtractions?
Chair, I would ask to add on one item. You can put it under me, which would be the approval of a proposal for data storage contract.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda with the amendment provided by Mary Catherine.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Francisco, support by Commissioner Osmer. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we have an adopted agenda. Now.
Do not.
But we did get her, I kind of looked it over. Yes, we can,
I'll make a motion, we receive a file.
okay.
I'll support.
Motion to receive and file the child care fund report. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign opposed. Okay. On to the next item, which is Rob.
Good afternoon. So costly and unexpected service repairs needed on one of the LifePak cardiac monitors for the non-invasive blood pressure function of the device. The connector was broken, did not allow its use. As part of the performance inspection to ensure the unit properly functioned, the device failed and required more repairs. Bring the cardiac monitor into full functional operation, the total cost of the repairs were quoted at $2,216.80. Cost of repair that was not anticipated or budgeted for. Under an annual maintenance and service contract with the device manufacturer Stryker, the cost of repairs would have been covered as part of that agreement. As we don't currently have this agreement in place, we're responsible for the full cost of service and repair. I did inquire with County Administrator Hannah as to the possibility for authorization for reimbursement for the expense for repairs, and she directed me to making a request to the Courts and Public Safety Committee for further consideration. I did authorize Stryker to make the repairs as it was required and essential life-saving equipment on each of our ALS rigs. Basically, if we wouldn't have paid for the repairs, it would have pulled the rig out of service until the repairs were authorized. So either way, we need to get it taken care of. So at this time, I'm requesting the Alpena Courts and Public Safety Committee to authorize reimbursement of the $2,216.80 to the city of Alpena for repairs and service to this cardiac monitor. The repairs have been done. We don't have an invoice. Mary Catherine was just asking if we had an invoice on it. We believe that the quote that they had given us is what the invoice is going to be, but we do not have the actual invoice as of yet. I don't even believe the cardiac monitor is back. So it's in transit, I think, so.
Okay. Well, that was one of the things that I was gonna mention too. So because it's a quote, I guess we can approve, we probably can approve, and although we just did, what was that email?
The email from the treasurer.
The email from the treasurer. So I did clarify with our treasurer the concern in, as you mentioned, it is about the reimbursement. So this is a reimbursement. So we would need an actual invoice and a proof of payment before we could actually reimburse them. Obviously, you could authorize an amount up to a certain dollar figure that then we would reimburse when we have that actual invoice and proof of payment. Currently in the equipment line item for the ambulance fund, which is 210-651-972-000, there is more than enough money. There's $110,000 because we spent far less than we anticipated on the new ambulance. Really, it's a question of timing at this point. Treasurer Ludlow was concerned that we would not be able to get an invoice and proof of payment before the end of 2023, in which case we would want to carry over, $2,000 or $2,500 for the 2025 budget. Or make that budget adjustment for the 24 budget if you authorize this reimbursement.
Yeah, so we will definitely need the invoice. And I don't know if we do actually carry this over, it would be a budget adjustment for next year. So,
Correct. So you could authorize the reimbursement and then make the budget adjustment in January for the payment of the invoice.
okay. One of the questions that I do have when I looked at this quote was, I don't know the difference between the line 1 for 138 and line 2 for 2292. What is,
So the $138 is actually just for the connector that was broken.
oh,
But in replacing the connector, obviously they noticed that there was other parts. It wasn't just the connector. It was a whole non-invasive blood pressure unit that was actually defective.
I didn't notice on the quote, it said the unit price is 138, but when you look over at the line total, it was 0. So,
Correct.
okay,
So if we would have had to just replace
that connector,
that connector, it would have been $138. But because it's the connector and all of the
everything else,
rest of it, that's why it's a
1948, okay,
20.
okay.
okay. So moving forward, I guess we could approve the payment up to 20,
22, 6 something.
22, we could say 2250.
Yeah, 20, yeah. Perfect.
And once the invoice and proof of payment is provided to the treasurer, then we can go ahead and reimburse for that. So,
I'll make that motion.
okay, so motion by Commissioner Osmer. I'll support that. Any further discussion of this? So go ahead and do that. We'll get that reimbursed, once we get the proper documentation. Okay.
And that would be from the equipment line item.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll try and get that by the end of the year. I just don't know if we can get it paid by then.
But we definitely won't get it paid to you before the end of the year.
Right.
More importantly, get the equipment back and get it in operation.
Correct. And I think under the contract, what would normally happen under the current ambulance contract is I would request permission for you guys to authorize the repairs. But given the fact of timeliness, we just went ahead with the repairs and we figured we'd ask for the reimbursement after. Because it would have been probably 3 to 4 weeks that it would have been out of service.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carried. Okay. Next item. Next item is 911 emergency management monthly update.
Afternoon, everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start off with 911. So our stats for the month of November, we had 41 texts either come in to the 911 center or we were trying to find out why we had a hang up. So we usually text them if we can't get a call back, just to see if everything's all right with that number. We had 554 911 calls during that month of November. and 2,182 CAD entries. So the CAD entries would be anytime law enforcement would stop or call into the 911 center, it would be logged into our CAD system. I wasn't able to go. Kim actually went to the Michigan.
Just a quick question. Is that up or down or kind of maintaining the same amount of?
That's a great question. I didn't have the stats for October or December so far. I just know usually in November, our stats do go up because of car deer accidents and the holiday and everything.
Yeah, just trying to put it in perspective is all.
Did you say 291 for the CAD entries?
2,182.
2,000.
Yeah, 2182. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that, it just sounds high from, I just kind of curious to know.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I wasn't able to attend the Michigan Directors Association's meeting down in Genesee County. Kind of the one thing that Kim brought back was the 911 office is looking to access traffic safety grants. And that would be a big deal for us because we'd be able to apply for grants for more radios, a new CAD system, some major improvements to the 911 center. So if they can get us to have access to those grants, that would be a huge plus for us. So. Weekly NOAA webinars are starting. They started just before Thanksgiving. So every week they give us an update on what weather conditions may be for the area. Right after the last court and public safety meeting, the West Shore was here to do maintenance on our 8 sirens throughout the county. They found that 2 of the sirens, their boards were not working. So we had to replace 2 boards and 2 of the sirens, and our power source and dispatch was also out. So that needed to be replaced too with the yearly maintenance on those sirens also. When I went to our Region 7 meeting, the first Thursday this month, I talked to the chair of the LETPA, which is the Law Enforcement Terrorism Prevention Activities Committee. She wanted to know if anybody would like to participate in that. I talked to her afterwards. Sheriff is now going to try to attend those meetings. They're every even month on the 3rd Monday. So we just had one this morning and they're talking about possibly getting active shooter. So they'll pay for the Region 7 will pay for that if any law enforcement would like to go to that. So that was the main topic from today. So if anybody has any questions for me.
Just a question that, I think last week you did interviews for a new dispatcher. Is that correct?
That is correct. We actually have one on Wednesday also.
Okay.
She was in the Air Force as a dispatcher.
Okay.
So she's moving to the area. So she just moved here yesterday. So we're gonna meet with her on Wednesday to discuss.
So that would be the 10th dispatcher. Is that correct?
That'll be our 10th dispatcher, correct?
So you had one last month and then you're just having another one, you said,
No, last week we had
last week
3 interviews, correct?
for one position.
Correct.
And then you have 2 positions available right now?
Yeah. As of right now.
This would be a 4th interviewee
Oh,
Yes, this would be the 4th person to interview.
Oh, okay.
for one position.
Okay.
Anything?
Anybody else?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next up is the Mary Catherine.
Yes, so last month you guys reviewed some updates to the ambulance fund policy and approved all of the changes that were presented in that ambulance fund with the addition of one other modification that you asked me to draft. So the draft that you have in front of you incorporates all of the changes that were approved at the last meeting. And then in blue on page 1 is the additional language that you asked to be included, which is that requests for the reimbursement will come to this committee on a biannual basis, July and December. The request should include a cover summary sheet with the total amount requested and attach detailed information, invoices, receipts, proof of payment, which will be required to be presented at the time that the reimbursement is requested.
So my thought on this is case in point, we just talked about with a a blood pressure monitor, what cardiac arrest piece of equipment, they had to get that fixed right away. Should that have happened, say in October, they would have had to incur the expenses and not be eligible for reimbursement until December or whatever. So I'm just, the requirement of doing it on a biannual basis, other than on a case by case basis, I just wanted to have that discussion to see if.
Well, I thought, because I think, and again, it's not on us, it's on the city, but, you know, I kind of thought we were talking about different times to do this, and it could be even quarterly. I mean,
Right.
I don't know. I mean, even if we do, we could change it to quarterly if that's, and again, I don't think the city's gonna fail over $2,000.
Well, no, I'm sure they are.
And I apologize. So this language really is specifically in regards to the EMS training and the equipment and supplies. So it's really in regards to the restocking and drug boxes
Okay.
and then the first responder supplies. I don't think there is language in here that says they couldn't come
Okay.
outside of that schedule if it were an emergency response, but trying to, you know, get on a regular schedule of getting those reimbursements in, both for the city and for the county, so that we're not, you know, either they don't get done or we're not getting, you know, 12 months worth at a time.
And we've had people do that 2 years for the lights.
Jeez.
Okay. But I mean, I think we can leave it as is, July and biannual basis. And then if there are other requests, you know, as needed, can bring them.
If there are exceptions to policy, then that we would consider, okay.
And again, probably this would be a good one to bring forward, because it wasn't something that would be expected. You know, it's not like they're collecting the drug box invoices or whatever, however they get them to get reimbursed. And, you know, I don't think, again, whatever because you're talking 10,000 or whatever it is for the drug box restock. I think, did we spend just 5,000 so far this year, or was it wasn't very much? Because I thought I was reading somewhere that the total so far was, what we've spent was, it wasn't up to the total amount of that.
Yep, $5,010 is what has come through this
That's not a
year.
problem for us to do it on a regular schedule.
Yeah, I mean,
You're indicating.
if we're doing it biannual, I think that would probably work. I don't think we should have any problems there. Other than that, and and I appreciate Kim getting this, because I like looking at the two to see, you know, refresh me, because when I got this at first, I'm like, what did we do here?
Right.
So this is good that we have the two. Really, you guys have kind of looked through this. Most of the changes have been made, and most of the changes were minor. So that being said, I would look for motion to.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Just clarification on page 3 of 5. It reads, we changed it, purchases that are not pre-approved. We took out the word will and changed may not be considered. Which opens it up for purchases then to be made without approval, right? Because it makes.
It just says they may not be considered. It does not say that you guys have to approve them. But like, for instance, this particular purchase
You
that
could say no.
they were talking about
Okay,
you would have had to have denied it
Right.
based on the policy.
okay.
It's not our intent.
This stuff happens.
Yep, exactly.
So again, we could still deny it
Right.
if we wanted to. Changing the will to may just allows us the option to go either way on that one. So. um, So with that, I would look for a motion to approve the ambulance fund fiscal policy and procedures.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
The motion and support. Any other discussion? Like I said, most of this stuff, and again, thank you, Kim, for getting this because like I said, I would have been looking at this. I know I was going through one of the other things here and I'm like bringing it up and I'm like, I can't do this. This is
Yeah.
too difficult. So any discussions on this? If not, all those in favor of the ambulance fund fiscal policy and procedures signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Same sign opposed. Okay, approved.
All right, so the next item up is the ambulance service agreement amendment. So last month, there had been a request and a proposal for an amendment to the existing ambulance service agreement with the city of Alpena. This board requested that we go back to the drawing board and instead of an amendment, instead of a new agreement, I should rephrase, instead of a new agreement, requested that instead an amendment be put forth to that agreement. The agreement actually goes through the end of next year, so this amendment would just be essentially till the end of the current agreement, which is 2024. It really modifies two big things. One is some language around the type of vehicle that the city is required to have in service for us. And then the second is around personnel. And the third is making a slight adjustment to compensation. So those are really the three big things that this potential amendment puts forward. And obviously, we have the city manager and the chief here to answer any questions that you might have about those proposed amendments.
Well, I looked at this. What I see out of this is literally just changing the current agreement because everything that was in that service agreement that we got last month pretty much is in this, with the exception of the Stryker annual maintenance for life pack cardiac monitors. Is Stryker the only one that does that?
There, it's a sole source provider. They are the manufacturer for not only our cardiac monitors, but also our power load system.
And to say that it's a slight modification is not accurate because this is a $206,000 increase from what we're currently doing now. And one of the things too, and again, we'll talk about the new agreement as we move forward soon, because we want to make sure that we have that, give us plenty of time to do that. But when I read this, I was thinking to myself, this, like in the disposable supplies, this cap is a 2% increase per annum over the life of the agreement, which is 1 year in effect, because this is just literally supposed to be an amendment. And then the other issue is the increase to the compensation for the county for the actual services, $1,112,542 or $1 million, whichever is lower. And again, when we're looking at over a 5-year contract, I think that, or whatever, 6-year contract, I would think that that would be something that we capture at one point during the year. We're not going back every month and reviewing this, because if we did, this would be too much work.
No, and that phraseology is exactly how the current contract reads as well as the previous contracts. So the dollar figure is set in the budget and then does not change for the year once that dollar figure is established, which is the amount listed or the 1 million.
So again, when I read this, one of the thoughts that came to my mind was, my thought originally was, what are the additional things that we want to cover? Not, let's rewrite this contract a year early and just add all the stuff in, like the striker maintenance. I would probably have no problem adding that in for this amendment. And the other issue that I have with the increase moving forward is the fact that we increased our millage to 1.5, which actually will be renewing it this year. And we'll be asking potentially for a 6-year, I would assume, because if we're gonna go into a 6-year contract, we would want to cover those extra 2 years, but as I went through this and I started thinking long-term, my thought was, as things go up, as things increase, my concern is that because with the ambulances, I'm assuming if we do an ambulance every 2 years, or not 2 years, two times in that contract period, we're potentially, I would think if you got a brand new ambulance, you're potentially talking like 350, somewhere around there, from what you kind of indicated. My concern would be whether we have enough to cover everything that we're covering out of the millage, and I don't want to, I guess, look at this short-sighted, and I know you could say, well, it's only $206,000 moving into this. But again, my thought was that we would look at costs, additional costs that the city may incur, but not, let's just, because again, when I look at this, the first thing I thought of as I went through is this is basically a change to the contract a year early. And again, when we were talking about this last month, I was looking at more of those. Well, we could get the maintenance for with Stryker. That's an additional cost. And again, you guys input whatever you want, but my thought was I didn't want to jump up to a new contract a year early because it kind of, in my mind, defeats the purpose of having a 4-year contract that goes through the end of this current year or next year. So that was my thought when I went through this. Anybody
I
else?
believe that was also kind of expressed last time we discussed this, was the fact that we didn't want a complete rewrite.
And again, I know when you look at this and you say it's an amendment, it looks like we took the contract and copied into a document that says amendment at the top, because most of this stuff is with the addition of under the recitals, we added D and E. Obviously, D was to put it through the term for January of January of 21 through 24, but that's already water under the bridge. That was the original contract.
Right, that just says that there is an existing service agreement and that this document would be an amendment to that existing agreement.
Yeah, because you have 6, golf and then hotel, and you go down to 7, then you go down to from 6 to 7 to 12. So it's amending the original document.
So it's amending paragraph 2, it's amending paragraph 4, it's amending paragraph 5. And 7 and 12.
7 and 12, right. That's all.
I mean, the original document is quite a bit longer than this, but yeah.
That's what I said, but when I looked at it, I'm looking at it as the chunks out of the original contract. And again, I have no problems looking at some additional costs that the city may have or think they're going to incur, and we can have those discussions, but I did not want to basically have this, and again, I'm just one person speaking here. My intent wasn't to say, let's bring forward the amendment to just say, we're going to just start the contract a year early. In effect, that's what this is doing.
This amends the original document, then it may look very similar next time, but it doesn't mean it's the same.
And
We had a lot more language changes in other areas.
Yeah.
So what we did is we highlighted the areas between the county and the city that we thought were, I guess, basically a good time to discuss that, open it up in the amendment. Especially like the power load systems, the maintenance agreements. We don't have anything right now. So we take all the liability, both the county and the city with that. if we have a failure, because the manufacturer does require an annual maintenance for that. It's just a liability we're trying to cover, and it's quite expensive, you know, like I said, it's just under 31,000. So those are things that we're trying to adjust and make right to cover both the city and the county's liability on those.
And then we discussed the compensation last meeting and how our costs have gone up substantially from that year one. And I think the intent was to have it be close to the 1 mil. Which we haven't had any increases in
4 years.
4 years.
Well, and I know I've been part of this ambulance committee going back to when Bob and Bill came to us, and which I always thought that was kind of funny because I'm like, okay, which side is he on here? Because he would walk in his uniform and then, but either way, I know that back then they had like annual increases. I thought there was some annual increases in it. And again, we entered into this contract 4 years ago, or at least 3 years ago, with the amounts that were indicated on the contract. So,
And this just gets you through the end of the contract term, which then contemplates that next year you could be looking at a radical renegotiation of the contract, or you could end up with something very similar to what you have right now with some different financial considerations.
well, and again, I look like, my biggest concern is, you know, we have 1.5 mils. So it's not like we have an unlimited supply of money, because whatever we're getting from the millage is actually, we're using the majority of this to cover this contract with the city.
Correct, in the 1.1 million, correct me if I'm wrong, the 1.1 million is essentially the 1 mil.
Correct. So
We're not asking to exceed that 1 mil.
Right. 1.1, the number that is quoted in that contract is what I was given from our equalization department as the value of 1 mil right now. So for the 2024 tax year, that is the value of 1 mil. Which means we will still have the 0.5 for the rest of the operations of the ambulance fund, which on the 2024 budget is more than enough to
So
cover what is needed.
1.12 is 1
Is 1 mil.
So we got, you're saying the 0.5 would be covering everything else.
Correct.
But then, and again, I know it's not a lot, but then you're talking about the pharmacy stuff, the disposables, the maintenance, then we're gonna cover and that 1.1, does that cover, that doesn't cover the ambulance that we covered, does it?
No, part of the
So that's
0.5
just the
goes
actual-
to
Yeah,
the
that's just the actual cost
service
of
agreement.
employees. So we still have to cover that. So that's where I'm going with this is, my concern is, and I get it's the 1.1 mil or 1 mil. But everything's gonna cost more, and we have a portion of that money going to the central tower to cover that. And again, I know that's not a ton of money, but at some point, my concern is something, so I did get a copy of the last 4 years, 5 years, 4 years. And we've had years where we've overspent on this fund. And then there's some years, obviously, there's years that we had additional in the fund. But again, where does that money come from when if we increase this up to the 1.1? And then with everything incurred, I guess if we're looking at an ambulance every 3 years as opposed to 2 years, there's no way we could cover an ambulance if it's $350 in 2 years, because that would seriously put a dent in this.
No, actually, based on the 1.5 mils, there is plenty in the fund balance to cover that. I mean, 0.5 mils is almost $500,000. So you have more than enough to cover the 22.5, the other expenses that are contemplated as part of the budget, as well as to put aside $100,000 or $105,000, $110,000 every year for your $350,000 ambulance purchase, plus make your $75,000 tower payment that comes out of this fund. And that's why that's why there's that language in the contract, which allows you to back it back down, right? So if property values drop and that 1 mil value goes down, that you owe under this service contract is the value of 1 mil. So if in 2026, 1 mil is only $950,000, then all you owe is $950,000. Now, it will be incumbent upon you, when you are budgeting, to make sure that you double check that, right? What is the mill? What is the value of that mill? And make sure that that's what's in the budget and that's what is paid to the city. Excuse me. But that's why that language has existed in those contracts, honestly, for the last 3 or 4 iterations of the contract that I can find, is that it's the 1 mil, the dollar figure or the 1 mil, whichever is lower. So, and the ambulance fund right now has a very healthy balance. So it's not as though if you have an odd year, once or twice, that somehow the fund is not going to have enough money.
So what are your thoughts on this?
My thought is I would like to make a motion to amend the current ambulance service agreement as presented. Because I don't see this as being
Motion?
an issue.
Just want to make sure it's with the. I apologize. So is it every 2 years or 3 years then? For the
ambulance?
purchase of an ambulance?
So the existing contract, the one that expires at the end of 2024, calls for an ambulance twice in the contract, which is only a 4-year contract. So it's every 2 years. But the presentation of an amended or of a new contract that would go into effect starting in January of 2025 would be that it would be a 6-year contract and there would be 2 ambulances purchased. So then it would be an ambulance every 3 years instead of every 2 years. And that came as a recommendation from the city that we really don't need to be replacing a bus every 2 years. Every 3 years is fine.
You presented that last month, correct?
But we would have to order the ambulance
No, that's in-
in order to get delivery.
That's in this.
That is in this amendment.
As presented.
Ordering of an ambulance in 2024 for delivery in 25.
It could be up to 18 months then to get that
They're in
ambulance.
12 to 18 month build time right now, so it might not actually even physically receive it in 25.
Because of supply chain, we have to order it 12 to 18 months out to be able to get it in time.
So then if we ordered it, the new contract would go through 25 through 6 years. If you didn't get it in 25, well, I guess you would still, you'd probably towards the tail end, you'd only have a couple of years left if you ordered one. And I don't know how soon you'd have to order that one, but you'd probably order.
What I would assume we would do is January 1, 2024, we would place the order for the ambulance. So it would go under that 2024 budget cycle. And if we entered into a new contract in 25, we would stipulate which year we would purchase ambulances. So that we could actually, if you will, pre-order them. So we're ready for delivery. If we decide to do every 3 years after that, like 2027 or 2028, let's say, we would order it so that the delivery time would be the first part of that fiscal year of 2028, if that's what we chose. So they would build it, we wouldn't pay for it until it gets delivered at that time. So we could realistically preemptively order these to say, okay, yes, we don't have money until our 2028 budget. We're gonna order it in 27, knowing we're not gonna get it until 28, and we don't pay for it until we receive it.
Okay,
Plus it locks in the price. Because if I wait 18 months right now to order an ambulance, I can tell you the price is gonna go up probably 50%. Because they have like doubled in price since.
well, and so that's a concern though. That's what I'm saying. So, in 2 and 4 years or whatever, 3.5 years, whatever, whenever you're deciding to order a new one, if it's doubling, are we gonna be paying $500,000?
That we don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
The problem is because it's such a market with the ambulance purchasing right now. I can't give you an example to say, yes, it's gonna go up 50,000 or 100,000.
But that's no fault of the cities or the counties. It's
And I would say,
it's reality.
I could say that the same thing about this amendment. We entered into a contract with the city 4 years ago, and that's what it is. It's no fault to the county that this was entered into. And whoever made the decision, agreed on the city's part, entered into that willingly to say, this is what we're willing to accept. So
Correct.
that's what I'm saying. My point is that my concern is that we could get to, if we, we got plenty of money right now, and that's fine. We got plenty of money in the fund, but if we're moving forward and say, let's take that additional 200,000 now, and we're gonna give it to the city, we don't have that extra, because like I said, the years that we were low, we lost, say lost money, but we used more money than we actually had in the fund. Is where I'm going, because
We had also, if I may, when we talked about the new agreement that we had talked about, the 6-year agreement, we had looked at that point of basically waiving the fact that we would get an ambulance in 2024. And we would push that out 3 years, because basically the ambulance that we got here in 2023 was back from what, 21. So it was actually delayed that long. We pushed it back because we knew we couldn't get an ambulance. So we pushed that back for the benefit of the county because we couldn't find one that was reasonable. That's why we had went and approached you with a new contract so that we could go to a 3-year rotation instead of having to buy one in 2024. At the last meeting when we were here, you said we need to honor the current contract, which is to buy an ambulance in 2024. Otherwise, we would go to that 3-year rotation with that new agreement that we had talked about. So we're trying to be fiscally responsible with the county and the city's money to make sure we're not replacing ambulances just to replace an ambulance. We believe the 3-year rotation is going to be beneficial to both parties because we're not racking up a bunch of miles on them. Yes, we have rigs with miles on them, but they're well maintained.
And you would hope that the 0.5 mils that you're saving back for equipment would also scale up with property values. And so you would have money to accommodate inflation.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, if you don't order an ambulance to be paid for in 2024, but being paid for in 2025, you've saved $250,000 on this contract. Because you have pushed out the purchase of that ambulance by that extra year and pushed it into the new contract.
okay. Well, we do have a motion. We had a lot of discussion.
Oh, yeah, if it fails for lack of support, then it fails. If we don't amend the contract.
Okay. And there's things in this that I would not have a problem with amending, or agreeing to. It's just, I don't know, like I said,
What is it that you don't like?
I just feel like we had a contract for 4 years, and now we're going back, we're a year away from the end of the contract, and we're basically amending it to be a new contract for the next year, which will probably roll into, because this language, when I looked at the actual contract that was presented, is basically, other than the striker thing, is pretty much the same stuff. And maybe the 2000, and I don't know, I can't remember if the pharmacy restocking was changed. Did that change? No?
It did, but all it did is match what you have already approved for the 2024 budget, which is a very slight increase in the amount of reimbursement for medical supplies and first responder, or medical restocking kits and first responder. And actually, you have been, the ambulance committee and the county board of commissioners have been approving that higher budget amount for those reimbursements on the last 3 budgets. It just was more than was actually in the agreement. So somebody had come and requested more money as part of the budgeting process than what's in the contract, and that has been approved as part of the last 2 budget cycles. So this is mostly just matching up the contract language to what has been approved as part of the budget.
And if we don't approve this amendment, you don't order an ambulance in 24 to be received in 25, correct? Or do you order it anyway?
I would order it because the current contract says that we're doing ambulance in 2024.
Right,
I
and
would
we would,
also add that with the drug box restocking and the disposable supplies, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Catherine, we hadn't actually requested those money since 2017. But we had not came to you requesting those reimbursements for, what, 4 years?
So this amendment just recognizes the fact that we're going to need it or to, that you need to order an ambulance. And then we want to get into that three-year cycle because the next contract is as you're assuming is you're going to request as we do a 6-year.
So I'll just say, here's where I'm good with everything from the 1 mil, 1.1 mil down. I'm good. This is what I get a sticking point on. Because I feel like we've got a contract for 940. And again, I might even look at, because I don't know where these numbers came from. I know you said that the cost have increased. What's that?
Which number?
Well, I take that back. I know where the number came from. It's the 1 mil. But my thought would be, I would be willing to look at what the costs, what increased costs you do have, and then revisiting this to say, we can fund that additional, but again, I guess my sticking point is that we entered into a contract for 4 years and now everything that was in that contract, and I know there's other things, everything in the contract is changing. And again, I have no problems with the additional for the pharmacies, the disposables basically is the same. And then an additional maintenance contract with LifePak. Although,
So I can add something to it, John, if I might.
Yeah.
Just on wages alone, wages alone went up 25% in order to basically bring our wage scale to be able to retain and hopefully attract people. That's not budgeted for in this. In the $940,000, no increase in anything that we would receive from the ambulance millage. We're not asking to exceed what the millage is. We're just looking to capture as much of that 1 mil as what we should be, because that's what it's designed for. It's for the EMS system, not only the first responders, but the ambulance transport system.
Yeah.
So we're looking to basically cover those costs, and that 25% increase just in wages alone is not accounted for. Also, not to mention that this contract was done pre-COVID. Everybody knows the cost of everything, including fuel, has almost doubled. Our fuel bill is astronomical when you're talking the amount of calls that we're doing. With COVID, we didn't do any less calls. We actually did more calls. We went up to 4,600 calls a year without the transports, without the interfacility transports. So our call volume has went up. All those expenses have went up. So realistically, to say that our costs haven't gone up, they've went up substantially, and that's really all we're looking
yeah, and I'm not saying that your costs didn't go up, and I'm just, I like a number to look at.
I can bring back a number. It's gonna be more than 200,000 now.
Likes to make me feel good.
I can tell you that our budget for the fire department is 3.7 million. And 98% of our calls are EMS related, not fire related.
And I
So-
believe, sorry, go ahead.
No, but
I believe the intent of this contract when it was first contemplated back 4 years ago was for the service or for the contract to be equal to 1 mil. I don't think the language is right in here, but we're not trying to make money off of this. We're just trying to even cover
And I'm
a
not,
little bit of our
yeah,
costs.
and I'm not saying you're trying to make money. I mean, just like, again, my concern is, and again, maybe I'm getting way ahead of myself, but if everything increases like we've been talking about, if everything increases, do we have enough to continue to cover everything as we get into, because this is that we're going to move into an extra year. So if we're going to go into a 6-year contract next year, this will be an additional year onto that, if you will, with an extra 200,000. I know we already have the majority of that covered, but in year 4, if everything is, an ambulance is $500,000, are we going to have enough to cover all that? That's my concern.
with that, we don't know. But we wouldn't have known that 4 years ago when we entered in this contract.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. That's this contract, the contract that we have was entered into 4 years ago and everybody was good with it. And now we're coming back and again, and 3 years, 4 years, you know, if wages, if everything is increased, you can come back to us again and say, you know, everything's gone up and now we need, you know, an additional.
Well, what we've asked for is the 1 mil. That's all we've
Right.
asked for. We haven't asked to exceed any part of the millage. The millage was intended for ambulance transport for EMS system. That's what it's for. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking for more than that 1 mil.
Okay,
And
well,
realistically, by going to a 3-year rotation, we're saving you money. We're saving you $100,000 every year just by going to a 3-year rotation instead of a 2-year rotation. I can't predict what the inflation is going to be on an ambulance or equipment or anything else. How much is the service agreement on the striker cots? If we drop somebody because we didn't do the proper maintenance on it, how deep are the pocketbooks? Because we haven't done the maintenance on them in a very long time. So realistically, that's not something, we're trying to prevent that. We're trying to do some good risk management to try and keep that reduced. That's why we're asking for that, because that wasn't built in there either. And that's something everybody knew before too, so.
So
I did.
if the motion fails, then what information do you want me to bring back to you?
well, and I'm just like, my concern, or I don't know if it is a concern. And I get it, it's a 1 mil. And I'm trying to get beyond this, like, I'm thinking too far, maybe that's the thing, I'm thinking too far down the road, that all these increased costs, if we don't have the funding to cover that, where do we get it? Because, and I know some of the other costs that we cover with that, it's not like we have a surplus of money that we just keep building and that just goes to the bank or whatever.
This is a fund, so yes, if you spend less than
Well, I know.
bring in, then it goes to your fund balance. So like for,
It goes the other way. If we
for-
spend more, we have
right.
less and then we got issues.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, if I may.
Yeah.
So any deficit that we have comes from our fund balance when we're not able to cover our costs. So it comes from the citizens of the city of Alpena. And the way this was written did not contemplate increases, and we've seen a lot. So we're asking for a 1-year amendment. You asked us to bring back amendment language. If not everything in here is what you want to move forward with, that's just fine. I just need to know what I can bring back to you to cover our costs for this year and not have the city supplementing services to the entire county.
And for us to hold their feet to the fire for 1 year because of things like COVID and increased costs and everything else, you know, I hate to say, you know, sorry for your luck, city. I don't think that's the right thing for us to do.
And we're in the same boat. I mean, obviously, we've got a $1.5 million deficit, and I know this has nothing to do with that. But we have to look at ways where we can cut too. And again, I know totally separate. I'm not saying that we'll cut here and be able to do that. It has nothing to do with it. I'm working my way there, so.
I think just for the sake of time, I would second Bert's motion because we can always take this up for further discussion then at full board and get the answers that Chairman Kozlowski is looking for before that meeting. Doesn't mean I'll support it then. It just means we can elevate it.
Got 2
So-
weeks. Okay. All right. So.
But do you know what it is that Chairman Kozlowski wants to go to the full board? It's not clear in my mind either, so I don't know.
I'll
what
talk more with Rob because maybe he can get me to see the light. Like I said, and it has nothing to do, I get it, I get the 1 mil, but it's, like I said, I got my head wrapped around this, that I'm already thinking 4 years down the road here. And I get it, you know, well, when we did the original contract, no one was thinking 4 years down the road that we would have to come up with, and fortunately for us, or no, we did, I was gonna say, we increased the millage, but we already knew that at the time because we
I
had
was
some.
gonna say the 1.5 was on already, but you know,
Okay, so, well, I guess we've discussed this we've discussed this enough and we can move on. We have a motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, we'll move on. And I'll talk more with you. Um, so. Okay. Mac Administrative Financial Status Report, what was the purpose of that?
It was just informational. This is a report that under the contract, the MAC administrator is supposed to be providing to us.
I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah, I know. I haven't seen them in a while either. And so we have just started requesting this report from them. And so I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of this and saw that, so that you can make sure that you continue to receive it in the future from the MAC administrator. This is just obviously, telling us where they are in spending the money from the contract that they have with us and the money that they receive from the state of Michigan. You can review that.
Okay, you guys review it? Did everything? Okay. We're good. We don't have to make.
Nope, you don't have to do anything with it. Eventually we can, just put it on as a regular receive and file.
And then the next item you added, data storage.
Yep, so this is in our IT director, Steve Musso, is here. If you guys, you will have questions. So working on data redundancy and redundant data systems, backup systems is something that has been a priority that we have been thinking about for the past couple of years. But obviously this is always a moving target. And every time you think you have it figured out as to what is the best system, something new comes along. One of the sort of curveballs that got thrown at us this year in terms of thinking about a backup system was the Carpel, which is the system that the prosecutor's office is bringing on. One of the things that we were struggling with was the amount of storage that the prosecutor's office was taking up, particularly now that there is a lot of video from the body cameras that the police have been using and the car cameras. But now that Carpel is going to pull, initially we thought we were going to have to store that here, but now that Carpel is pulling a lot of that off, but it is still an open question as to how much Carpel is pulling off and how much we have to keep here. Again, moving target. That being said, we did budget for this both as part of 2023, as part of the IT budget, but also as part of 2024. Steve believes that he has a recommendation, but obviously 2023 is waning very quickly here. And so to be able to move on this at this point, we kind of need to be a little snappy here. The quote that I have is just, anything above $24,999 needs to come to committee and the board for approval, even if it is appropriately budgeted. The contract is for $38,000 for the first year. $37,908 for the first year, and then an annual service agreement essentially of the $37,908, $38,000 for 5 years. It's a 5-year contract. And at this point, Steve believes that this is the best option moving forward. So Steve, I don't know if you want to kind of fill people in a little bit on this option versus some of the other ones you've looked at. You don't have to go super in detail, but maybe just high level.
As far as the redundancy goes, we were looking at the redundant data center as one of our options, and that comes to, my estimate was about $180,000 to put a redundant data center at the sheriff's department. Not sure how deep to go in the rabbit hole here, but there are a number of issues with that along with the cost, and that is that our network is laid out so everything centralizes in the courthouse across the street. So even though we would have that redundant data center, there could be issues with if something happened to the courthouse itself, then that data center really isn't any value because our links are all here. So with that in mind, and with the extra amount of effort it takes to maintain another data center, you almost are looking at another person to take care of that data center. We've looked at some online options, and this is what this one is. It's a cloud-based system that takes all that away so that if all we need is an internet connection, and we can get back all our servers at any point in time. It's so simple, literally, that if no one from IT was around, Mary Catherine or any of the commissioners, anybody could call this company and say, we lost our data center. we need you to bring it back up, and they can bring it back up. So it's got that kind of reliability. So that's why we're looking at this one a little hard.
What's
The reason the crunch,
what's the company?
Carpel?
No, Carpel is
the system.
Carpel is the system that the prosecutor is going to be, this is,
it's through IT Partners.
yes, IT Partners. Sorry, that says it right there on, I should be able to read that. IT Partners, right there on the front of the
The
document.
reason that it's coming to a crunch now, timing wise, is because the current contract we have for our backup system, when we initiated that was in April of the year we initiated it, whatever. So I was looking at April renewals, which gave me till April to get all the ducks in a row and get everything organized. But what it turns out to be is that in year 4, last year, they changed their model. Well, that was the end of that contract, so we went with a new contract, and they changed their model that year. So what they did is they started on January 1st. I didn't catch that, because there's actually two components. One is the software, one is the hardware. The hardware component remained at the April renewal date. So I saw that, I looked at that. I'm good till April, I got it, no problem. Turns out the software component actually begins in January. So now I've got a crunch that we've got to get this other system up and running before the other one ends, and that only gives me a really small window. So the request is to be able to commit to the contract now. We'd still pay it next year as we planned. It's just that it gives us the time to get started right now and get this thing operational so we can meet that January deadline.
January 24,
I think it's January 20, yeah, January 20.
next month.
Right.
So when you were saying that the other one the other system was renewing in April,
Right.
so April has nothing to do with it anymore?
No, that was the reason. I thought I had till April to get this part of it done, to get the approval done. So I wasn't concerned about being in a rush. After I got back to the contracts and looked at the second component, the software side of it ends in January. So now I've got to make a change before that one ends.
When did you realize that?
Like a week ago.
So if we renewed with Cohesity, which is our current provider, it would be $29,000. To go with this new system is $38,000. So it's a difference of about $8,700, which Steve has in his budget. So there is enough in the approved 2024 budget to be able to handle the additional $8,700. But this level of contract is above what I or Steve can approve without coming to the board for approval. So it is budgeted. It's not a question of needing to increase the budget or anything like that. The funds are available. But this one is a switch, which I feel like you guys need to be aware of, but then also contract approval.
So nothing really needs to be done next year because you've already basically figured out where to cover the 87.
Correct. There would not need to be any budget adjustments for 2024 in order to be able to pay the IT Partners contract.
Okay.
But because of the policy that was set, it exceeds the threshold, so that's why we're back here.
If it were a renewal, if we were just renewing this contract, easy peasy, lemon squeezy, we could do it, no problem. But because it's a change in contract, this is something that needs to
So
come.
how do we get that information? Because that would have been nice to have that.
Yep, I had it, I got it from Steve today, so I can forward this on to
Okay.
to folks. This is obviously a confidential business document, so please don't share it, but you can absolutely get this to you.
Just a quick question. So, I'm sorry, Carpela or
Carpel.
Carpel? When we originally had discussed that and agreed to go ahead and go forward with that, is the current system we have in place, it's sufficient enough, just the new one is better, right? Am I understanding that?
No, so that's slightly different. So, and I apologize for conflating the two. So, Carpel is a data management system
Okay.
that will be used by the prosecutor's office, right? It's a way of doing case management, file sharing, all of that other kind of stuff. But one of the things that we had been struggling with was data storage because the prosecutor's office has been using massive amounts of storage and keep using more. And that plays into how big of either a redundant data center or how much data we need as part of a cloud backup system. One of the things that is budgeted and will have to happen regardless of whether we go with this contract or the Cohesity contract is that we will need to buy an additional SAN. What does SAN stand for?
Storage area network.
Oh, wow, that was super difficult, wasn't it? An additional SAN unit for data storage just locally. That's about $25,000 that we have budgeted for. We were concerned that maybe that wouldn't be enough because if we were going to have to store all of the data locally for the Carpel system, we were worried that maybe we were going to be looking at 2 or even 3 of those. But as it turns out, a lot of the data for Carpel will be uploaded to the cloud. It's not entirely sure how much yet. I know that still is back and forth with Carpel, and there have been some changes because now Carpel is being bought through the Prosecutors Association. So some of that cost is being offloaded. But we believe that the purchase of an additional SAN will be good for our local storage needs. And then the IT partner solution will handle the backup. Right, the copy of everything so that if something happens, we can get it back.
So I guess in follow-up, did we know when we went with this new system, it was already discussed, I'm guessing by them, hey, you're gonna have a lot of stuff coming in. Okay, so that was all,
That's one of the.
it was just a matter of locating and.
With the prosecutor?
No, with the data storage. So that is the discussion, Steve.
I know she had mentioned that she was gonna require more storage
Right.
when she talked to us.
Yep. So, and that is another thing that Steve is working on is just straight up video storage options for us, which will then, because when, right, this is a bigger discussion. The storage that Steve is planning for is what's the county going to need for the next 5 years, right? Because we don't want to have to buy new stands every year. And up until a year 18 months, 2 years ago, when they were storing lots of data, it looked like we were going to be fine. He bought enough. We weren't going to need more. If we can figure out an additional system to offload some of the video storage, then it's going to free up more room and we will have more than enough room to make sure that we've got plenty of local data.
And this is all done in the cloud?
The backup system is, so we have all of our servers that sit downstairs, right, that host all of our stuff locally. We own it all. It's all right here. This is just a backup that lives in the cloud.
If
Yes.
some kind of catastrophic failure locally, as Steve
Oh,
said,
so
we can
that's what
call
you're
and pull it
saying.
off.
Yeah,
Yep.
if something happened, you can say, give us all our stuff
Yep.
back
And boom, downloads from the cloud. We have it all back.
And then, I'm sorry, last question. So originally, Steve, you said the original unit you were looking at was like roughly 125,000 or
180.
180,000, sorry.
Yeah, the other option was, I estimated it, I didn't get quotes on everything.
But you said that was where we would put it out maybe at the sheriff's as a backup.
And then this particular system that you guys are looking at is roughly 80,000 for a 5-year period, right? 38 for the initial and then 30.
No, 38,000 per year for 5 years. So that is
I'm-
100 and it's about the same. It's about 200,000.
But what Steve also said with the his 180K estimate is that it may require more personnel support too. So that cost really hasn't been figured in. So potentially could even be more than 180.
So at the end of 5 years, then what? Then you have to enter into a new contract?
Yeah, redo the contract. Same thing if we did redundant data center. After about 6 years, you're looking at refreshing that whole thing. All the equipment's updated, so you're looking at another 150, 180,
Yeah.
whatever the pricing is at that time.
I need to get some clouds because
It's the way to go, apparently.
okay, so do we need?
So we're looking at about a difference of 50,000, what was originally planned versus going with the system, which
Over the course of the 5 years, it's actually only about a $10,000 difference. Cohesive, right?
Well, actually, what it turns out to be, I can't predict the future again because of pricing, but based on the price difference between last year and this renewal year, if I run that out 5 years, it's actually about $9,000 cheaper to go with this new system than to stay what we're on. And this is a far better system.
So we would need a motion then to approve
the IT partners contract.
I'll make the motion to approve the IT partners contract as presented.
Presented and
I'll second, as long as we can have one more question after. All right.
no more questions. You have.
Yeah, you're done. So Steve said roughly $9,000 cheaper, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Francisco, I guess I didn't hear him say that first, but he said there might be additional staff.
He said it may take additional staffing.
We've got three things here, sorry. So we have, if we stay with our existing contract, which is Cohesity, if we go, or we can go with this new contract, which is IT partners. The third option is one we're not recommending at this point, which would replace either of our current systems.
Got it, okay.
We'd be building an entirely new redundant.
Okay.
Out at the sheriff's.
I
Right.
didn't have coffee today. My whole day has been like this.
It all starts to merge. And so if we did that one, then yes, you might be looking at not only additional staff, but the maintenance of the equipment and the data center out there. Right.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion. Did you get that, Kim?
Mhm.
Okay, motion and support. Any other discussion? Okay, if not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passed.
For the sake of time, Chairman, I'll make a motion. We accept and file the.
You have a date tonight?
Oh. But usually we get these, we read them through.
Yeah.
If nobody has any questions, I would say that we file
Yeah,
9, 10, and 11
okay.
and have any questions on, they look pretty simple.
So if we did have a, because I'm just curious, with the medical, okay, we have a motion. Would you support that?
Yeah, I'll support it. Thank
Okay,
you.
we have a
Yeah,
motion of support.
Pretty straightforward.
The only question, again, we don't really have anybody to ask. Are you the medical examiner?
I'm the proxy at the moment. I might be able to answer, I might not.
Just one of the things that I caught my eye is when I went through it, I'm like pending cases. And I was just like, wonder how long a case can be pending.
If they have sent a case down for autopsy, it probably means they're either waiting for autopsy reports or they're waiting for scene investigation reports back. I know typically the turnaround is not long on autopsies, so
One was pending since September and I'm like, is that?
that they're probably waiting for additional, toxicology reports or other kinds of lab reports.
All right, so any other discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign, opposed? Okay, motion carried. And then, is that it? Other discussion, is there other discussion? No?
Should to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn, support,
Support.
all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye? Anyone's gonna oppose that one?